Good morning. I'm Olivier Oullier from EMOTIV, and welcome to the Global Education and Skills Forum 2019. We're here this morning to celebrate and hear the achievements of Mark Pollock. Mark Pollock is on a mission to cure paralysis, and in order to do so, he understood that he not only needs to mobilize the research community, but also all of us. And this is why he's the co-founder of two very important organizations. One is the Mark Pollock Trust, that is supporting research globally to find solutions to spinal cord injuries. The second one is Run in the Dark, an organization that makes us run every November across the world and that has already spread throughout 50 cities globally. Mark has been named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum and received 2 honorary doctorates, one from the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. The other one is from Queen's University, Belfast. He's raced the South Pole, and recently, the TED Talk he gave with his partner, Simone George, has already reached 1.5 million views.
Back in 2010, I fell from a second-story window onto the concrete below, and I don't know what happened. Nobody does, but I suspect I got up to go to the bathroom that night, and as a blind person, I used to use my hand to find my way. That particular night, my hand found an open space where the closed window should have been, and I cartwheeled out. And the friends who found me thought I was dead. The doctors in intensive care suspected I was going to die, and when I realized what had happened, I wondered whether dying might have been the best outcome. I had fractured my skull, I had 3 bleeds on my brain, massive internal injuries, and I couldn't feel or move anything from my stomach down. All of that added to the blindness that had happened 12 years earlier. Now, I'm sure you can appreciate that I didn't choose any of it. I didn't choose the accident, the injuries, the consequences. None of it was my choice. But by way of making sense of it, I've come to acknowledge that sometimes we choose our challenges, and sometimes challenges choose us. It's just the way it is. But what I'm more interested in is what we decide to do about it. I think that's what counts, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the decision to be a spectator or a competitor, and a little bit about deciding to be a soloist or a collaborator over the next 15 minutes or so. And I am going to use the backdrop of my expertise. You've got to be an expert, I suppose, if you're at a forum like this. And unfortunately for you, my expertise is in acquiring disabilities. I'm almost world class at that particular endeavor. So I'll use that upbeat storyline as the backdrop for my session. But I'm going to go back for this first theme, to be a spectator or competitor, back to 1998, 20 years ago, whenever I could walk and when I could see. And at the time, I was a student, soon to be graduate at Trinity College in Dublin. And after graduation, I was going to go and start a job in investment banking, which in 1998 was almost socially acceptable to say that you wanted to be an investment banker. But more than I want to be an investment banker or a student, I was a sportsman, and I was rowing for the university and also for my country. So I was someone who knew exactly who I was and exactly where I was going in life. And in the space of 2 weeks, that changed entirely when I lost my sight through detached retinas. And in those 2 weeks, I moved from the person that I just described to someone who was excluded from university life. I didn't think I was going to get a job, and I certainly wasn't involved in my crew anymore, in my sports team. In the space of 2 weeks, I lost my sight, but I also lost my identity, which is the purpose of telling you this story. And over the following 10 years, I set about on a quest to try and rebuild my identity. I got back into rowing, winning silver and bronze medals in the Commonwealth Games, rowing for Northern Ireland, which wasn't the World Championships, it wasn't the Olympic Games, and my desire to race conspired to keep me going, racing in deserts and mountains and oceans. And it wasn't really until the 10th anniversary that I lost my sight that the opportunity arose to take part in an event at the level that I had aspired to before I lost my sight. And it came in the form of a 43-day expedition race in the coldest, most remote, most challenging place on Earth in Antarctica. It was the first race to the South Pole since the Shackletons and Scotts and Amundsens went down to Antarctica 100 years before. And to do it, I would have to drag sledges for up to 16 hours a day, on cross-country skis through crevasse fields. We'd be racing against Norwegian Special Forces and British Royal Marines and people who had raced to the North Pole previously. And after 1,000 kilometers at temperatures as low as -50, I had the chance to be the first blind person to race to the South Pole, to arrive at the South Pole. And I simply had to be part of it. Now, to do it, I would have to raise €150,000 and find 2 teammates who'd be willing to take a chance on a blind guy. And in Ireland, we don't have much snow, so no expertise is really what I'm saying when it comes to polar travel. And my first teammate was an Irish guy, certainly who looked the part. I mean, he had a big shaggy beard and long hair. He looked like an extra out of a remake from a Antarctic history movie. But he had a rugby background. Strength and conditioning was his thing, not polar travel. And when we were thinking who might we get to join our team, you could have gone for a British explorer, but the British, unfortunately, in history, don't have a great history on returning from Antarctica, as evidenced by Captain Scott. So we flew over Great Britain to Norway to try and find a Norwegian who might be able to guide us to the South Pole. We found that guy called Inge Solheim, a seasoned campaigner, grew up in the snow, grew up in the mountains, and he took a chance on 2 Irish guys to go to and race to the South Pole. So to give you a sense of what it was like, I've got this little video before I tell you the point of the story. So let's play the South Pole video, please. Now, the question you may be asking yourself is, why am I showing you my holiday footage from 10 years ago? And the purpose of the exercise is not just to indulge myself on proving to you through video footage that I actually did arrive at the South Pole. To explain this story about rebuilding my identity, I want to go back to the money, the €150,000, because I thought some big sponsor would give us €150,000 and put a logo on the side of our sledge, but not even the penguins go into the interior of Antarctica, so no one was going to see the corporate logo. We didn't get the money off a big corporate, but as part of the panic to try and raise the money, I thought if we wrote a book about it, we could put a corporate logo on the front of the book, and surely they would give us money for that. And as part of this exercise, I got on to 30 of the top literary agents in London through email, and then I followed up with phone calls to try and get hold of one and secure a big book advance. And I got through to a guy called Mark Lucas in London and explained my pitch, told him I would be the first blind person to get to the South Pole. Surely he could find us a publishing deal so we could raise the money for the entry fee. And he said to me, "Look, I'm surprised you've been put through to me, because as everyone in my office knows, there's nothing I find more boring than icy tales of people who go to the North Pole, South Pole, climb Everest, and then come back and inflict a book upon us. So I'll not be trying to get you a publishing deal, although I wish you all the best with the race." And I thought it was a little harsh. His words were a little harsh, I thought, but he was absolutely right. There is no book for me to hand out at the end of this session, right? But I raised the money from lots of small donations, lots of people who wanted to be on the team, went and did the race, got the video, and I came back and I got invited on to the BBC in London on the breakfast show to tell our story for 4.5 minutes. And as I walked out of the studio, I was checking my phone to see who had seen me on TV, needily checking my emails. And there weren't too many, but I did see an email from this guy, Mark Lucas. And I thought to myself, big regrets, Mark Lucas, you've missed the boat now on this epic book. And I clicked on his email to see what his grovelling words were going to be. And he said, "Dear Mark, I've just watched you on BBC television, and I got to tell you, I have not changed my mind." Which I thought was wholly unnecessary to go to the trouble. But the next question, of course, was the important point. He said, "But what was it really about? What was it really about?" And I suspect literary agents are in the business of finding out what's inside someone's head, because it was never about the ice and the snow. It was never really about the hardship. It was simply me on a quest for 10 years to try and prove to myself that I could feel normal again, whatever normal is. That I didn't have to be on the sidelines as a spectator, that I could be a competitor, pursuing success and risking failure, that I could indeed be in the arena again. And having proved that to myself, feeling unstoppable, feeling like I could be a competitor, not a spectator, I ended up a year later having that accident, landing on the concrete below, finding myself in intensive care in hospital. And this second point is to perhaps debunk the hero narrative, because spinal cord injury strikes at the heart of what it means to be human. And I discovered that it wasn't just the lack of feeling and movement, it also interferes with the body's internal systems that are designed to keep us alive. Nerve pain, spasms, infections, time in hospital, shortened lifespans, all these things are common. And in many parts of the world with the right supports, they're manageable. But what I found challenging, as I said this morning on stage, that up to this point in history, it had proven to be impossible to find a cure. Whilst at the same time, history is filled with accounts of the impossible made possible through human endeavour. And inspired by so many stories of exploration, I started asking myself, why can't that same human endeavour cure paralysis in our lifetime? And I started to search around the world for people working at the fringes, people who I like to call explorers, the scientists, the technologists, the people in labs. And to give you a sense of what I found, I got this little video, so let's play the next video, please. Just to tee up perhaps what we're going to talk about with Olivier and some questions from the floor. Coming from a sports background, convinced that the competitor mindset is how we win, we started to find lots and lots of world-class performers, world-class competitors working in robotics, electrical stimulation, nerve bridging, stem cells, optogenetics. Brilliant people working in brilliant isolation. We found soloists, and we did not find much evidence of collaboration. And I think for the really big breakthroughs, it's collaboration where we make those. So I'll maybe pause there and pass over to you, Olivier.
Sure. Listen, it's really fascinating, these dynamics between collaboration and competition. In full disclosure, we're close friends, and I know about your life, the personal and the professional life. And what is interesting is that you see Mark Pollock, but Mark Pollock is an ecosystem. He's an ecosystem of people, companies, organizations that work all together, collaborate, but also challenge you on a daily basis. And I think one of the biggest person challenging you is your partner, Simone. For me, it's impossible to talk about Mark without talking about Simone and her role. One thing I would like for you to share with us is building on the last video. You are one of the founding members of the Druid Collective, a group of young global leaders of a World Economic Forum and global shapers that are on a mission to bring deep tech innovation into real life. to help startups and projects that are scientifically based, hardcore, rigorous science, onto the market. Can you just share with us how, in your particular case, what you've done with scientists has not only allowed to help better understand and move forward with curing paralysis, but also has business impact?
Yeah. Well, I think what coming into this, my only qualification was that I was paralysed, and what we found was there are these amazing people, in particular in UCLA, a guy called Professor Reggie Edgerton, using electrical stimulation of the spinal cord to allow for voluntary movement. A massive breakthrough in the lab. But the transition from the lab into the world, to move from the few, like me, who access the research, to the many around the world who don't have access to these technologies, requires us to create companies, to fund those companies to cross the valley of death, as they call it, for commercialization, and identifying problems with electrical stimulation, commercializing, creating the devices to get out in the world. They couldn't raise the money. They just couldn't raise the money. So we turned to a group of people in a network in the World Economic Forum. We created an initiative called the Druid Collective. And really what it was to do was to try and help amazing scientists and technologists to access business know-how, finance, to cross this valley of death. And what we did through that network, not by raising the money dollar by dollar, but by connecting people with money to amazing scientists and amazing experts, we were able to raise an initial $5 million to help create the initial prototypes. And the ecosystem that I am part of is filled with challenges, and it's not going to be solved by any individual. It's going to be solved by many people finding a way to work together where everyone wins.
You went a long way. I remember almost 5 years ago, I was with you at UCLA, and Mark crossed the 250,000 step mark with his robotic legs, and this happened in the basement of UCLA. Basically, you moved this top research from the basement of a top research center to the public eye, and then to something that has become a business. And I think this is a benchmark way beyond what you're trying to achieve. The fact that there are so many scientists that are doing extraordinary things that we no longer hear about, for starters, and second, that people don't benefit from. And I think that is amazing what you've been able to achieve with the Mark Pollock Trust and with the Druid Collective. Let's turn to the room, and we've got a microphone circulating, and please, we've got a lady on my right that has a question.
Thanks so much for sharing the room. I think someone must be chopping onions, so I got some dust in my eye or something like that. But anyhow, my name is Sophie Bailey. I'm the founder and host of the EdTech podcast, and our latest series is about Education 4.0. So how do we teach in this fourth industrial age? I just wondered, given how you were talking about ecosystems and bringing sort of all those players together, whether you have any suggestions on how to kind of reflect that in our day-to-day education, be that in universities, colleges or schools, or beyond.
Now, of course, the big challenge in the questions and answers is not to just say something, but actually try and answer the question. So let's see how successful we are on this. You know, I have the conflict, or the perceived conflict between competition and collaboration is something that I've really been learning as we've gone through this particular journey. So I think from an education perspective, we need brilliant people being the best they can be, and that requires us to have a competitor's mindset. So I think that is the foundation. But for things to get done, we need to find a way, and I don't really completely have the answer on this myself, but we need to find a way that that those competitors and those people striving with ambition to move forward can come together and collaborate, because the word collaboration is bandied about in every country, every government, every society in the world. But in reality, we do it really, really badly. So in terms of your education, what you're designing, if you can find a way to get the best people in the world to work together and somehow park the massive egos that no doubt everyone has, including someone talking about themselves on stage. If we can find a way to collaborate that becomes normal, then I think we're going to do great things.
Mark, building on this, yesterday night we had one of our usual late night conversations, and you brought out something that is very relevant to the question. Is the fact that competition is necessary in order for science and technology to advance. There are generally several groups in the world that are working on similar topics, and they compete and they emulate each other. But at some point, one needs some organization, some ecosystem to allow them to work together. And this is what you have achieved so far, is bringing people that were working in isolation to work together. At the education level, this is something that needs to happen as well.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're talking about is selfish endeavors, which is sort of around competition. We need a certain amount of selfish endeavor, either by individuals, teams, in my case, university labs, perhaps by schools or countries. We need that endeavor, but it's the selfless side of things. I always think of it as the game in science is to get funding for your lab, so your lab can do work, be financed and do interesting work. That's the game. It's very specific to the group. Publish articles, get more finance, keep things going. But if you elevate the game up to the grander prize, which in my case is curing paralysis in our lifetime, well then there's room for all these competitors to come under the grander why. So it's a sort of selfish and selfless together.
Elevating the game in science. I love it. Another question, please? The lady in front of you, Mark.
It's a privilege meeting you today, Mark. I'm just a very ordinary mortal. I'm a freelance writer with a lot of flaws and a lot of complexes. And listening to you talk today, I was just wondering, how do you not have any bitterness that life has made you this expert on pain, as you said?
So I missed the last little bit there.
Can you speak a bit louder, please?
I said, how do you not have any bitterness about the way life has made you an expert on pain, as you said? Yeah,
no, I definitely do. And I was talking a little bit earlier on about Admiral Stockdale. I'm particularly interested in people who have experienced life at the extremes, and I think the realists of the world manage to confront the brutal facts and keep hope alive. Now, in confronting the brutal facts, for me, that suggests that we only look at the negative. In my case, blind and paralysed. But to really confront the brutal facts, I have to also say that I can use my arms, that I live in a place and time in history where opportunities are abound, that I have lots of support around me and I have a chance. So to truly be a realist, we have to start with all of the facts, the good, the bad and the ugly. And certainly there was a lot of ugly crying in hospital and bitterness for what had happened until eventually we start to move forward. So the brutal facts for me are that, I'm just telling you the best version of my story today, but it is all true. Loss, grief, acceptance and opportunity. It's all true.
You're talking about losing your hair here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. How rude.
We've got a lady on the front row in front.
My name is Lopa Patel. I'm from the media. Thank you very much, Mark. This is a personal question. You have a lot of tech in your life. What's your favorite piece of tech?
Yes. Well, I sometimes just, because events have moved on with the paralysis and everything, but the foundation tech, having access to the world through the internet and a talking computer and a talking phone, dealing with the blindness really opens up my world. Having access to information is absolutely critical, and I know lots of people in the room around education. Access to information is not the norm for everyone, but it starts with access to information, and then what that has allowed me to do over time is find out about all these cool technologies. So the robots are brilliant, but they're not going to cure paralysis. They're like a Trojan horse to get in and have a conversation. The electrical stimulation, which is difficult to demonstrate visually, is the kind of the engine that's going to allow the human bodies to start to function again. So, and then I'm trying to get EMOTIV to work with me on a brain-machine interface to roll into that entire mix. I've just told you all the technologies I'm using there, have I?
No, but that's great.
And at basic level, a Braille watch so I can try and keep my timings, which I failed at.
We got time for one last question.
Okay.
A lady on my right.
Yeah. Hi, Mark. My name's Shanti Clements from the Talal Institute. I was actually going to ask you a question about what was the experience like wearing those robotic legs, and you've just alluded to that with the electrical stimulation.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
Well, you know, I'm rewinding back to 2012 when I stood for the first time. You see, now I'm sitting beside a neuroscientist, so he may say that this explanation is nonsense, so this will be a stress test to see what I've been saying for years is nonsense. Whenever you're, for your balance, use your sight, use feeling, proprioception, and the balance centers in your brain at a basic level. The robotic legs gave a great chance to rise up out of the chair and move, starting just with simple movement. My concern when I went over was that without sight and without feeling, I just simply wasn't going to be able to use this incredible technology. And when I went and stood for the first time in the robot, just standing up was incredible, never mind moving. I just felt like my old self. I was able to stand up. My dad was with me at the time. I was able to give my dad a hug. Now, it was mainly his head because he's a very short guy. But it just was incredible to stand in that technology and know that my historic disability of blindness wasn't going to prevent me from accessing this technology as a foundation for everything that's come since. So, a big relief, I suppose, was the emotion that I could use them and I wasn't going to just fall over again.
No, and from a scientific point of view, so I was there when you started to use the robotic legs, and I think what is important is that at the beginning the robot was walking and you were in the robot.
Yeah.
Then you moved into having an active role in interacting with the legs.
Yeah.
And you switch from just being carried by the robot to controlling the robot.
Yeah.
And that is important. It's also important in the way the brain is going to evolve. With my company, we've recorded Mark's brain back then, and we're comparing his brain activity to the brain activity of people who are like Mark in a wheelchair, but don't have the possibility to use robotic legs. And the fact that even passive movement and semi-active movements allow to keep the motor and premotor functions in the brain is crucial. And this is something that beyond mobility and the ability to regain some autonomy is very, very important from a neuroscientific point of view. We got one extra question. We've got a very young lady on your left that is going to close the session.
Good.
Please introduce yourself. I think you're coming from very far. She's super shy. Can you tell us where you come from?
Singapore.
Wow, what's your name, please?
Chamonix.
All right. Tell us.
Who inspired you when you were growing up?
Who inspired you when you were a kid?
Who inspired me when I was a kid? Explorers. The explorers of people who do things for the first time. People who go to the South Pole, people who go to the moon. Amelia Earhart landed in Ireland first flight across the Atlantic, I think. People who do things for the first time and don't take no for an answer. Maybe that'll be you one day, eh?
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.